Morning guys, so I've got the car at the workshop today. I've got this ramp for the morning, or basically as long as it takes to change the engine mounts. I've got new engine mounts from Porsche. I did think about going with some Renline or RSS mounts, but just opted for the original mounts. I've kept everything pretty much original on the car since I've bought it, and all the repairs I've done. Apart from the control arms and so on, I did those using mailer. So there are the engine mounts. I managed to get some penetrating fluid on there yesterday and the day before as well, so I've really let that soak in. I've also put some WD-40 on the top bolts as well, just to help it all along when I try and get it open. But going by what other people have said by this job is that they always say put a load of WD-40 on those bolts before you try, because they are difficult to get off. So it's pretty tight getting into this area here to clean up this bolt, but I've tried using a wire brush, so I'm going to now give it a go, try and open it. Okay, so that's pretty good. Putting that oil on was really useful because that is now moving pretty freely. I don't know if it's the nut that's turning or the entire rod that goes through into the mount, but it doesn't really matter because either way they'll both come out. Let's see if this one is as easy as the other one. That was quite surprising actually, from what I've seen on YouTube, how difficult they've been to open. Now let me just make sure I'm actually doing this the right way. So, that is back here. Oh yeah, that's a bit harder, that one. Right, well, it's moving and making a lot of noise, but I think I might put a jack underneath now to make it slightly safer. So I've got those two bolts at the bottom of the engine mounts loose enough anyway. So I've now brought the ramp down and I've put it on a support under here. These supports compress slightly, so there's no damage there, so there will be no damage there on the sump guard. But now I've got to take the airbox out and the air pump out to get to the two bolts on the top of the engine mounts. But I wanted to do those first, try and open those first, because if I couldn't get those open then I'd probably have to take the rear bumper off. So to remove the airbox you need a 30mm socket on here, a screwdriver for this, and you need to undo these two catches here. There's one there, they just literally pop open. There's another one down in there, and then you have to take the MAF sensor connection off and unclip the oil filler neck. And then when that's out you have to take the air compressor out as well. So the engine mount bolts are an 18mm, and you also need a deep socket bit to be able to make it over the ends of the bolts. So airbox is out. Just be careful when you take the airbox out that these two grommets here, they sometimes get stuck on the pins that locate the airbox into the body. So when I took it out for the first time I found one of them lodged down in here, so just make sure they don't fall out. There's one on that side as well. Whenever you're doing any work as well, it's probably worth putting some tape over this inlet manifold here. So just undoing the engine mounts here. At the top, the bolts are also a 13mm socket. And because I've put that oil on, they seem to be coming out very, very easily, which I'm quite pleased about. So then taking the compressor off, or the air pump, there are three fixings, one down there, one in there, and a nut up here. They're all 10mm. So this one down here is pretty difficult to get to. You can just see it behind that tube there, that braided tube. So 1, 2, and then 3 at the top. And then this unclips, so I tried that last night, and it should come out. So once you've got the 3 bolts out, or the 2 bolts and 1 nut, then there's that one clip here, which interestingly is a Mercedes clip, and then you've got to undo that clip there which holds some other wires in, and then it comes out like that, giving you all the access you need to that second engine mount. Also, just while I'm thinking of it, in order to get to this rather tricky nut back here which sits behind the compressor, I used a joint on the end of my socket set which actually worked pretty well. And I say, with the oil, by putting WD-40 on it, they just open really easily. So I'm just going to try and take this out now. So this way, the camera's not really... Okay, well, that came out really easily. Just having a first look at those engine mounts. To be honest, they're not as bad as I thought they would be. Yeah, I mean, they're original, and there is a difference, but there's not much difference. But just because it isn't showing much more of this rubber section doesn't mean inside isn't affected by all those years of use. So definitely worth doing, I think. But yeah, not as bad as I thought they were going to be. So while I've got the space, I'm just going to get in here and give it all a bit of a clean up. Check if anything's missing or broken. And then put it all back together. So I've cleaned things up a little bit in there. Obviously you can do tons and tons more, but I haven't got a huge amount of time today, so that'll have to do for now. But yeah, I also got the air gun on the engine and just got all the dust off it and so on. But at some point I'd really like to clean the engine up properly. Okay, so I've got the engine mounts in, both sides. Ended up being a little bit fiddly because the method we used to bring the engine up meant it lifted on the left-hand side more than it did on the right-hand side. And I saw somebody else on YouTube who did the same thing, and they had to get a jack on the right-hand side just to bring this up a little bit. So we did use the trolley jack just under there just to bring it up. And then it's best to just fit this in and then move it left and right, wobble it a little bit, just so you know that it's in the square, so that the square nut on here, look, this square nut sits nicely within the corresponding square hole in the carrier, which is this section here. And you can feel it because it clicks in and it goes dunk, 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 and it's in. So then what I did, I left these loose and then tightened up the bolt from underneath. Didn't torque it up, just tightened it up a little bit. Just looking all the time from underneath, just to make sure that when I was putting some pressure on that bolt, that the rubber part, i.e. this part, wasn't flexing when I was turning it. Because if that's turning when you're doing that bolt up, that means this hasn't located in its hole. So it did happen to me, just, I started off doing it very carefully and then realised that hadn't located, so I took it out again, lifted that right-hand side of the engine up with that trolley jack, and then made sure it was all in before I started tightening them up. So I'm going to torque these bolts up. I'll tell you what those torque wrench settings are in a minute, or I'll bring them up on the screen, that's probably easiest. Yes, I need to realign the exhaust tips, because obviously they'd been set with dropped engine mounts, and it's quite interesting by how much. Look, that's not quite, I mean, it's resting on there. Oops, it's resting on there almost. There's about 1 millimeter space there on that side. But that's how much it has, they had dropped by. Quite noticeable. On the other side it's slightly better, but only because I haven't tightened that bolt up yet. So yeah, that's the next thing to do. Because I've replaced those brackets on the exhaust, the ones that you undo to adjust these, I'm hoping that I don't have to take the rear bumper off, but we shall see. So I've got the air pump back in, so I just want to do a quick check to make sure everything is on. So that nut there is on, the nut, which is slightly difficult to get to, back there is in and tight. That is, these cables are back in this connector here, or holder, and the connector to the air pump is back in. this supply or feed pipe is back on, that's good. One thing worth looking, when you actually take the engine mounts out and you drop the engine drops, you know, when you drop the engine a little bit, is that I pulled these cables through these connectors here. So the two connectors, which are rusted anyway, but when it came down a little bit, they popped out and broke. So it's no big deal. I'm just going to get some new ones and fit those in at a later date. But otherwise, there's quite a lot of slack on this one, so when that goes down, when the engine drops a little bit, that was fine. But otherwise, everything I believe is okay. We'll put the airbox back in now. Okay, airbox is back in. Tighten the clamp up here. Put the filler neck into that clip there. And put the cable for the MAF sensor in here. And also down in here. There's another one in there. And tighten this bolt up here.